So obviously, I'm very excited to talk to you because I saw your story when you posted it in the group, and it was just mind-boggling, first of all, and then the positivity that came through that story, I think is just really, really worth sharing to as many people as possible. So, if you would please go ahead and give us a little bit of your background and share the same story that you kind of told me in the Facebook group with everybody else.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, yeah, I've got quite the origin story. My mom became pregnant with me when she was 15 years old. My mom is one of 15 children. Her father was the local trash collector in a small town. One day, he drove into the town square. There, he spotted two police officers. He then stuck a gun out the window and opened fire on those police officers, killing one and critically wounding the other. And he was eventually captured and brought to stand trial where he was facing the death penalty. And my mom testified at his murder trial that the reason that my grandfather had shot and killed that police officer was that that police officer had raped her, and she was now pregnant with his baby, who was me. And that's kind of where my life started. Eventually, my grandfather first trial ended in a hung jury. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And he ended up serving, the rest of his life behind bars, more than 40 years, leaving behind, his family of 15 kids and, including my mom and now me to kind of deal with the consequences of what had happened. And eventually, my mom turned 21. She ended up meeting a man who would become my stepfather. Come to find out that he was an alcoholic and very physically and emotionally abusive to me and my mom, and had to deal with that. Eventually, my mom had four more children with him. And because of the lifestyle that they were living, a lot of the things that needed to, common care for the kids fell upon me as the oldest. And because of all of that, my schooling definitely suffered. Eventually, I was, held back in the fourth grade. I had missed more than 60 days of school because my mom would rather me stay home and help watch the kids than go to school. And plus, I hated school. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. I still can't spell. After I flunked the fourth grade, I was placed into special ed, and to get the help that I needed there. Come to find out I have dyslexia. And so that was kind of where my life started up through fourth grade. And then eventually my stepfather was walking home drunk from a bar one night when somebody else was driving home drunk from that bar, and they ended up hitting and killing him. And it was at this time that my mom, here she is, five kids. She had dropped out of school in the eighth grade, no kind of education, never worked outside of the home. And as hard as her life has been to this point, losing my stepfather and kind of the looking to raise five kids on her own was more than she could handle. And it was at this time that she decided that she was going to take her own life. And fortunately, she was not successful with her suicide attempt. But at that time, my family got split up while she went to the hospital to get the help that she needed. And it was at that time that I went to go live with my grandmother, the wife of the man who shot and killed the police officer. And for the first time in my life, I kind of had that stable household. And then eventually my mom was released. And it was at that time that she decided that she couldn't care for all five kids on her own. And that's when my family kind of got split up, and I went to go live with my grandmother permanently. And my she still has, she had 15 kids. There were still a few of those kids living at home with her. And my was just a saint. So she was raising four or five other grandchildren for whatever reason, and now me. But living in that household, I didn't have to worry about my stepfather coming home drunk and beating on me or my mom, and didn't have to worry about waking up at 2 a.m, with crying babies. So for the first time in my life, I got to really uh, reflect on my life and how it was going. And I remember one day I was at school and a counselor came from the university to talk about, what you needed to do to get into college. And at this time, my life, was not great. The prospects of my life weren't great. And I kind of saw where I was heading, and I wasn't enjoying, the direction my life was going. And it kind of clicked in my mind, like, what if I could, go to college and graduate from college? And anytime that you kind of tell yourself you want to do something that's going to be hard or takes you out of your comfort zone, that voice in the back of your head starts yelling at you, don't even think about that. And I can remember, that voice telling me, Nelson, you're in special ed. You can't read, you can't write, you can't spell. The family that you come from, of my Graham's 15 children, only 2 had ever graduated from high school. None had even gone to college. And so I remember hearing all that negative self-talk, but, flash forward, my life sucked. So I needed something to change that direction. And 12 years after setting that goal, 4 different colleges, 4 years in the Air Force, I finally became that first person in my family to graduate from college. And that's when I became really obsessed with goals and personal development. I realized if somebody like me with coming from where I came from under the circumstances that I came from, if I could graduate college, what else could I do with goals and personal development?
That it's absolutely incredible. And there's so many things in there that I think you mentioned that really would be where people would not uh, hold it against you if you kind of just settled into what that lifestyle was. If you settled into what where you were at that time, and it's remarkable that you were able to turn that around with just sheer will of thought.
It's like anything in life. You have to take advantage of the opportunities that are placed before you, and when you do that, no matter what those opportunities are, you get to give them meaning. And that's one of the things that it kind of changed my life and changed how I look at things. Is I truly believe that we get to give meaning to everything that happens to us in this life. And if we get to give meaning to it, why on earth would we ever give anything a negative meaning?
I 100% again agree with you. It's not exactly what you do, not what opportunities are available to you, but which ones you take advantage of and which ones you go with. So you mentioned needing to leave your town kind of to reinvent yourself. I think that's something that I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of people, because you can't really discover who you are if everybody's telling you who you've been. So you kind of have to go out on the road and really start to set yourself up for who you want to be in life. So tell me, was the town you came up in that obviously they knew your story, probably a pretty popular story around that way. Was it a small town?
Yeah, about 6,000 people. And if you've ever lived in a small town, everybody knows your business anyhow. And then, put on top of that my grandfather and my mom's testimony and that whole thing. So yeah, there were definitely lots of stairs and points. And in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, I talk about some of the very interesting challenges that I had to go through, and some good stories in there that being in a small town under these circumstances that I had to deal with.
Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Come find us on Facebook so you can comment on this and other clips and episodes of Starting Nowhere.